Okay, so another key issue we need to think about with regards to work is the question of access to the labor market. Who can get jobs, who can't? What kind of jobs can they get? Um, the question of full employment has been one uh, within capitalist economies for a long time, and is the stated goal of many capitalist economies. But in fact, when we look at the numbers, um, unemployment is a central feature of all capitalist economies around the globe, meaning that some people go without work. This, of course, is another major issue today as companies close um, and shutter for the pandemic. Now, what determines unemployment? What determines access to unemployment? It's worth noting that we're talking about official employment and official labor markets. And labor markets are really the key question of buying and selling your work. And the state of the labor market is often what determines unemployment. In other words, if people are buying more workers, buying more labor, then unemployment will go down. If nobody's trying to get more workers to expand and to grow, then unemployment goes up. And again, there are also unofficial labor markets. There's a great deal of work in our society that's not done on the books, from nannying and taking care of children. I run around for exercise these days, and I see a lot of people who are clearly paid employees taking care of people's children in my neighborhood, for example. And they may or may not be like on the books. The official unemployment rate now is pretty, or was pretty low, but there's a number of different ways we can look at unemployment. We can also look at the question of the labor force participation rate. And what this shows us is how many people who are of working age, 16 years or older, are actively seeking or working, seeking work or working. So we can see that the lowest this has ever been in terms of, or the highest it's ever been in the 1990s is not even up to 68%. So this tells us today that around 40% of the working age population is not working. So the question of access to work, well what determines our access? Part of the reason some of you are getting jobs today is because that degree will get you access to better jobs. So education is a key thing to consider. For a long time, women were denied access to jobs. Today, we see a much higher participation of women in the workforce. But keeping in mind, age is also a current issue. So we notice from this slide that older people and their participation is declining. So qualifications matter, education matters, but also the flip side matters. We talked about social class during thinking about economic inequality. Well, if corporations are hiring matters, and remembering that the employment relationship is a power relationship. And we're going to think about power in work in the next video. But for this one briefly, the question of whether or not you're given access to a job is a question for employers, for businesses, for capitalists. And often unemployment can be used as a tool, the threat of unemployment can be used as a tool to discipline and control workers. Increasingly, we see mechanical innovation displacing workers. We see issues of what's called de-skilling. So if a job is de-skilled, that means it doesn't take very complex work. Then it can be shifted overseas. So textiles or clothing manufacturing was de-skilled in the 80s and shifted to where we could find cheaper labor. Again, these are tools that are used to discipline and control workforces both globally and in the US. Even those technological innovations that tend to displace workers can be seen as part of this class struggle. For companies, if they think they don't have to deal with workers, then they'll try to find ways of doing that because workers are always so demanding of benefits of decent living wage. We'll look at that a little bit more in the next video. One theorized way in which work is going to change in the next 10, 20 years is the introduction of artificial intelligence. Just as with the computer, a whole class of jobs has disappeared in terms of organizing and transmitting information, secretaries and assistants, for example. AI may replace an even larger amount of very skilled labor. Even people with master's and doctorate degrees might be displaced. Corporations, of course, always prefer obedient workers. And so AI is a very attractive alternative, a way of kind of disciplining the labor force. So this also begs the question of where do we look to in the future if jobs are simply going away? What we've seen is that labor markets tend to adapt and evolve over time, but many theorists suggest that in the future this could be a real problem, that there simply won't be enough jobs for everyone, and then what is society going to do?